A year later, I was able to walk on my own with no assistance. And Sonny, okay, right now I want you to touch each finger to your thumb on one of your hands. See, that would take you a few seconds. Well, that took me 10 years before I was able to do that. And it was 10 years, like to pick change up off the counter. That was 10 years.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Physiotutors podcast. Today we have with us Curtis Sanderson, a former professional bull rider from Canada. He's a traumatic brain injury survivor. His TBI occurring in 2002. He was then in a 3 weeks medically induced coma and spent about 20 years now on an amazing road to recovery journey of relearning how to walk, relearning how to talk, and everything else in between. That Curtis, that's a very brief sort of 30 seconds into who you are now. This is a sort of new aspect of the podcast that we're doing with patient perspectives on their journeys, on their rehabilitation. Why don't you take 2 minutes to introduce yourself to the audience, and then we're going to break down your journey step by step.
Hello, everyone. My name is Curtis Sanderson. I'm an extremely severe traumatic brain injury survivor. On June 26, 2002, at the Pinoca Stampede, I lost my balance and my head smashed the bull's head twice. I spent 3 weeks in a drug-induced coma, and then I spent a week short of a year in therapy, learning how to walk, talk, regain the use of my left arm, and basic life skills. And Sonny, 2 weeks before my accident, I had a severe concussion, so my brain was already injured to a certain degree, and the 2 hits I took at the Pinoca Stampede took it over the edge. So I'm living proof what happens when you go back too soon without letting your brain heal from the first concussion.
Yeah, and this is what we were just saying before we started as well. The thing with brain injuries is that because you don't see it, people, especially in the sporting world, they don't necessarily want to acknowledge the impact that it can have both in the short and long term as a result. So as you mentioned, you had the concussion 2 weeks prior to your larger accident. We'll touch on to what happened in that concussion later on and the preceding weeks, but talk to us a little bit about the accident itself, what it is that you can remember. Maybe perhaps you watched the footage back, because it's one of the big 5 events globally, right, if I'm not mistaken. And then maybe talk us through a little bit about the following weeks as to what you can remember, what your first memories were following the incident, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, Sonny, the last thing that I remember was setting my rope on the bull that day. And then the next thing I remember was 3 weeks later, the ambulance ride from one hospital to another. And I mean, when I woke up, I didn't know where I was going and what had happened. And when I started my therapies, like with my speech, I had to write everything down in a scribbler to communicate for the first couple of weeks because I was unable to talk. And my writing was so messy at the beginning, people could hardly, they couldn't read my writing, and I had to move my left arm with my right. When I took my first steps in physio, the therapist walked alongside me for an hour a day, teaching me how to walk step by step and be your cane, left foot, and then right. And there would be an assistant walking behind me with a chair so I could take a break once in a while. And it was a big deal to walk 10 feet without stopping. In the middle of June this year, I walked from my place. I walked 20 miles in 9 hours and 2 minutes. And I started out with a feeding tube, pure food, then diced food chopped up in little pieces. And now I caught my own steak, and I started out with ice chips, thick water, now the real stuff. And I learned how to transfer from my wheelchair to a vehicle. And in the fall of 2010, I regained my driver's license.
That's, when it's put so succinctly, it seems like it's quite a short journey actually, but it took 8 years to get to the position of being able to drive again. How long did it take before you could walk again unaided?
A year later, I was able to walk on my own with no assistance. And Sonny, okay, right now I want you to touch each finger to your thumb on one of your hands.
Yep.
See, that would take you a few seconds. Yep. Well, that took me 10 years before I was able to do that. And it was 10 years, like to pick change up off the counter. That was 10 years. And signing where there is a set of stairs in the public, there's usually only a railing on one side of the stairs. Well, it took me 8 years before I could use that left railing again. A lot of the times I went down the stairs backwards just so I could hang on to the railing with my right arm. And if there was no railing, I'd be stuck at the top or bottom. And I had to ask a lot of people up and down the stairs the first few years. So it seemed like the 10-year mark was a magic number for my left arm to really get clicking.
That's one of the biggest things for me in your journey, is the length of time and the grit and determination to push through for 10 whole years. There are a lot of people that would have accepted the limited use and wouldn't have pushed for 10 years to regain a modicum of control, to be able to get back to quote unquote normality in that sense. But before we dive in to what it takes to push for 10 years to get that full usage back, can you maybe talk to us about the brain injury itself? What aspects of the brain were injured and how that had an effect on your fine motor control, on your speech, and what other therapies it was that you had to undergo? Because it wasn't just physiotherapy, right?
Oh, no. I mean, it was physio and occupational and speech. Those are the three big ones. And I don't know the exact areas of the brain that were injured. I just know there was a lot. And on the Glasgow coma scale, well, it starts at 15 and goes down to 3.
Yeah.
And I was a 3. I was as low as you can go. And they had me as an extremely severe traumatic. And I just know there's, damage kind of all over the brain. And they were, I guess, shocked that I was still around, but it was one thing I found after 20 years of recovery, the biggest thing is recovery is you'll keep getting better as long as you want to. And that's the bottom line.
So again, if we come back to that 10-year thing, so it's obvious there's elements of frontal lobe damage there. They would have done all the scans. Did the doctors, when you were initially given the rundown of your symptoms, of your issues that you were facing, of the long-term issues that you would be facing, did the doctors give you actually, Curtis, you're going to be able to get full use? It's going to take some time, but you're going to be able to do everything again. Actually, Curtis, yeah. Give it a few years and you'll be driving again. Did they give you any of that indication? Was there anything from the medical profession side of things that you thought to yourself, it's going to be a rough road, but hey, I'm a cowboy, I'm going to get through it?
I'll tell you the truth, Sonny. Like, I don't remember them exact talking to me, but between me and you, sometimes doctors could be the worst critics because they say you ain't gonna walk, talk, yada yada yada, but they don't know how much determination you have, I have, so they can't say, well, you can only get a mile down the road when you can get 100 miles down the road.
Yeah.
It's all right here. That's what determines how far you go.
Yeah, what's inside. Now, that's kind of why I posed the question, because it's thought that the brain can only recover so much following injury, whether it's someone who suffered a brain injury as a result of a stroke or something else. It is thought that there's limitations to how much can be regained. Now, I've seen videos of you hauling up 40 pounds worth of grain in both hands and walking backwards up the steps, no handrails needed. I'll be honest, if you were a patient that came to me in the state that you were in right at the beginning, then I wouldn't have thought that possible. I would have probably assumed that the doctors would have said, listen, get back to as close to a baseline, probably walking with an aid, and then jobs are good and away you go kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's one thing I find things to always keep raising the bar or keep challenging myself to get better. And it's, well, I guess the bottom line is you don't get better sitting on the couch.
No, absolutely not. No. As important as rest is, if rest is all you do, you're going nowhere fast. But with that said, you've already mentioned you had your SALT, your speech and language therapy. You've already mentioned that you had the Occi health as well, occupational therapy rather, not Occi health, and the physical therapy. How long did you continue with each of those disciplines? Because 10 years is quite some time.
Well, I was in therapy for a week short of a year. And then, I guess I've just been doing my own since. But Sonny, I don't know if you guys have it there, but when I was in therapy, me and a couple of friends, we took therapeutic horseback riding. And, it's a chance to get back in the saddle again. And it really, at that time, I was just starting to walk more and more. And it really helped with my balance and strength. And it gave me something to look forward to. And horses are very therapeutic and good to be around. And when you get on that horse, everything goes away and you're just, well, I guess you're having a good time and it's just having fun. It's helping you lots at the same time.
So it's almost that you did your own guided therapy. You found your own route through it. When did you start doing that then?
Like when I did that therapeutic riding, like when I was still in therapy, but we have in 2004, I started, it's called Courage Canada, the trail ride to support brain injury awareness. And it's a fundraiser for brain injury centers around here. And I ride in the trail ride every year. And then I ride at, last weekend I spoke at a bull riding event and I did my speech on horseback as I rode around the arena. And
Beautiful.
Horses are, I already said it, but they're very good to be around for anyone.
Yeah. Incredible. And this was something that you had decided yourself, or was this something that was recommended to you, or is this something that was more, like you mentioned, you did it with a couple of friends, so it was more of a community thing?
Yeah, I've always liked riding horseback, and I just, I guess while I'm riding horseback, I'm helping my recovery at the same time. And Sonny, it's hard to explain, but as soon as I get on that horse, my brain just lights up. Like it's such a good feeling, like your brain just lights right up.
Okay. And that's something else that I've heard you mention before within your recovery. There were certain moments within your recovery that were almost light bulb moments that helped push you through. what are the things that for you, from the patient's perspective, the patient's side of things, during your rehabilitation, were your drivers to get through and keep pushing? Because I've heard you mention the feeling of grass on your feet for the first time and walking was an amazing feeling. I've heard you mention that being able to transfer and do things for yourself were amazing feelings. Can you maybe give us some of those, the things that you've mentioned before, that were helping to keep you driven on this journey of 20 years?
Well, like when I started writing things down in a little journal or whatever, I wanted to, first, I think it was like 48 days after my deal, I wrote, I have a lot of work ahead of me. And then I put, to be a speaker, teach people and help others. And it's a good feeling, going to brain injury centers or other events where there are survivors, and they can hit home with my story because I've walked down the road that they're on. So it gives them hope in a way that they too can recover. And I had a friend that had a similar accident as me, and I was able to help him throughout on his journey for the first year or so. And to answer your question, what kept me driven to keep going, I just, if there's an opportunity to get better, I'm not going to stop putting in the work to make it happen. I'm going to do everything I can to get the most out of my recovery. And for 20 years, it's been my full-time job, and you have to make it your job to get better.
You're a really driven person. Very intrinsically, your motivation levels are quite high to push through it. Like you mentioned, even picking something as simple as picking up change. Can you maybe talk to us about the speech side of things and how that had impacted you? Because for a period of time, you weren't even able to do so much as swallow your own food, let alone communicate with people like we are doing now. And again, that's another massive milestone for someone, I think.
With speech, I remember, besides writing the script at the beginning, but right at for the first things in therapy, I remember practicing blowing bubbles. And then we, there'd be a group of, say, 6 survivors called the oral motor group. And we'd take turns pronouncing vowels and then words, and then putting words into sentences. And at the beginning, my speech, it was pretty rough. And that's one thing, even after 20 years, people tell me that my speech, everyday speech, is still getting more clear. So it's good, it's getting more clear so that when I'm out speaking, people can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. And there was also a particular phrase that you needed to get off your chest as well, right?
Sonny, the first 4 words that I had to tell the world was, my ass is sore. Because after every meal, I'd have to sit in that chair for an hour before I was able to lay down and to ride in that chair all day. And I remember, at the side of my bed, they had, you can ring the nurses. And I remember them nurses must have hated me because I was ringing them all the time, asking if I could lay down yet. Because at that time, I was unable to make my transfers. So they always had to come help me. But yeah, I guess those are some important words I have to tell the world.
Absolutely. Now, that's a fairly important part there. You were unable to make your transfers yourself. Is that because there were other injuries throughout the body? Had you broken a leg, broken an arm? This was a bull riding accident.
It was just all towards the accident. I don't know. And saying that, throughout you know, from beginning till now, the first step of independence that I had, or the biggest step of independence, was that day when I was able to make my own transfers, because then I was able to take myself to therapy for my meals, and it was just a huge step of independence to get back again.
Fantastic. Now, did you notice, or have you noticed, any of the changes in yourself since the accident? As you know, from a lot of what you've said, frontal lobe damage does look very likely. I know you say you don't know exactly which parts of the brain were injured, but when we look at speech and language, when we look at your voluntary movement patterns and things like that, were there other things that were affected as well? Maybe your memory as on the whole, your concentration, your mood regulation?
I'm pretty lucky. I never lost any memory. And I mean,
Aside from the 3 weeks of the coma, I don't think
besides
anyone will
that,
remember that. Yeah.
I'm pretty lucky that way. And I mean, yeah, there is definitely mood sometimes jump up and down. But I'll tell you what, throughout with recovery or life, I mean, you're going to climb mountains, but you're going to walk and crawl through a lot of valleys along the way. But it's those valleys that build character and build resilience to see how strong you are and what exactly that you're made of. You darn sure find out what you're made of after 20 years.
For sure. And especially doing what you're doing now, going to schools, going to radios, going to events and speaking about your journey and helping to pull people across their own finish lines in essence as well. It's a big thing. What would you say are some of the important factors for you during your rehabilitation, and not just the rehabilitation in therapy for the year, but your rehabilitation over the last 20 years and as it pertains to the future as well?
Well, I'll say some characteristics that I think are very important. Having grit, commitment, confidence, courage, determination, tenacity, perseverance, optimism, resilience, and by far the most important, patience. They're all a choice until it's the only choice that you have. And it's those characteristics that carry you through.
And what about for those people that were around you as well, for the support from your local community? How was that? Family, friends?
Yeah, I mean, family and friends. Sonny, I'll tell you, some of the biggest support that I've had over the years is from complete strangers that, you know, either they'll hear you speak at an event or they see you somewhere and they come up and give you their feedback. And like last weekend, I spoke at that event and there was a young lady. She was with her mom and aunt. And, you know, it was after I spoke and she come up, she was in tears and she said, your story changed my life. And I mean, to hear feedback like that is, well, it's pretty darn powerful. And I spoke at a school in Panoka, and there was a 7-year-old boy, and he walked up to me and he said, I'd like to thank you for never giving up. And it's those words, those little comments and feedback that take you through a lot of days when maybe things aren't roses and sunshine.
I said it earlier as well, but I think it does bear repeating. You're incredibly driven to have gotten as far as you've gotten and to also strive for excellence, to strive for more. And it is incredibly inspiring to see someone come from a journey of being wheelchair bound, being unable to communicate, to living a full life. But when I've already asked you, what did the doctors say when they were giving you your bill of health after the accident? When you were discharged from therapy, what were the instructions that you were given at that stage?
Well, when I got discharged, like there's a hospital like 10 minutes from me. And that time they just wanted me to, I think it was like maybe another month, like once a week. I took just some extra little therapy on walking. But, they didn't say a whole bunch. I just took it upon myself. Saying that's the true test of recovery is when you go home and you are no longer on a schedule. I mean, you don't have to be a physio at 10, occupational at 11, or speech at 1. You have to decide right here how much time and effort you're going to put into your recovery. And it's up to you. I mean, I guess you're the captain of your own ship, and what you put in, like the old saying goes, like what you put in is what you get out. And that's the bottom line, is you have to want it. If you want to, you will. End of story.
No, absolutely. I mean, I have this conversation with my patients, especially the ones post-operatively as well. The hour or 2 hours that you spend with myself in clinic a week is nothing compared to the rest of that week. It is a drop in the proverbial bucket. And there is all this other time outside of what we do together. And there is this massive element of you've got to put in the work. Like, you're only going to get better if you're going to do the work. I can do everything. I can be the best physio in the world, but I've only got an influence of an eeny-meeny little bit in comparison to everything else that's going on in your life and in your journey.
And Sonny, 2 years ago, I wanted to ride my stationary bike across Canada, and I just kept track of the miles on the calendar. And I started out in Vancouver, and I've gone 3,919.5 miles in 147 days. And
jeez.
Well, I'm across Canada now, and I'm going up the East Coast to St. John's. But when I first started the ride, like I'd go 2 hours at a time, and it took me 2 hours to go 30 miles. I've knocked down to an hour at a time. Last summer, I went 30 miles, 91 minutes and 7 seconds with way more tension. And like last night, I did 18.8 miles in an hour. And I'm boosting up the tension more and more, to make me work harder. But I can ride that bike with my eyes closed and no handlebars to challenge my balance more. And that bike ride has played a huge part in my recovery also.
That is something I want to touch on, to the core control and your overall stability as well. But I think right there is a very, very important message as well, of taking control of your own destiny, so to speak, and putting in not just the proverbial miles, but the literal miles in doing your own work and pushing yourself, because you were told from your rehab of an extra month, not that much, not to disparage your care providers. They obviously did a good job to get you to a fantastic baseline, but you've then taken the torch from that point and decided to make the journey something of your own completely. And I don't think that point can be emphasized enough, if I'm honest, as it's not often that you hear that or you see that someone has set themselves these kinds of challenges to push, sitting on a stationary bike and putting in the mileage that would equate to a journey across the country and then up the coast. And I'm assuming you're probably going to do a bit of a Forrest Gump of going all the way around, maybe without growing the beard out, but yeah. But aside from the cycling, before we get on to the balance side of things and other disturbances that you had, what other things are you doing to keep yourself fit? As I've had patients with brain injuries before who would struggle to carry one bucket of 40 pounds of grain or 40 pounds of weight, let alone two going backwards up the stairs.
Yeah, like in the winter time, like when we're feeding the cattle all winter, all winter long, I can carry 2 pails of grain in my right and one in my left, But I mean, carrying those pails all winter darn sure keeps you in shape. And then I go skating quite a bit in the winter, so that helps me keep in shape. And then this summer, I'm gonna try riding like a regular bike outside and see how that goes. And Sonny, give me a number right now between 100 and 200, and I'm gonna show you something.
173.
Okay, I'm gonna go backwards by 7 to 0. Okay, 166, 159, 152, 145, 138, 131, 124, 117, 110, 103, 96, 89, 82, 75, 68, 61, 54, 47, 40, 33, 26, 19, 12, 5.
Holy cow.
But Tiny, when I was first in the Glen Rose, like that's the rehab hospital in Edmonton, they got me to count backwards from 100 by 7, because every other number gets to be a pattern, but 7's always changing. But like when I just did that little number game there, boy, my brain is just firing right now, boy. It sure gets things popping.
It's quicker than I could keep up. By the time you were 3 numbers down, I'd just done the math in my head to double check.
And then
That's incredible.
I can do the alphabet backwards now too, and that gets the brain popping too.
Oh yeah, that's also a tough one. So these are games that you were doing as parts of your rehab to test and to work on your working memory, right?
Yeah, like I mean, I never started. I started doing these numbers here. Well, I've done the numbers since day one, but with the alphabet. But I just found just something to challenge me, and because I know when I'm doing it, my brain's just firing, and I know it's helping. So it's
doing something for you. And then are you also, when you're doing this, are you doing other tasks at the same time to be multitasking and to work the memory and work other aspects as well?
Yeah, and like say, I usually do a lot of my exercises to music, and while you're doing the exercise, I mean your brain's popping to remember the words to the song again. So for right at the beginning, to help with my short-term memory, I put in whatever some of my favorite CDs to see if I can remember the words, and that music helped lots with my short-term memory at the beginning. That's one of the biggest things that helped me.
Well, that's a great little tip there. And now that you mention it, I know a couple patients that would absolutely help with in their rehabilitation for both concussion, and then someone else for another issue that they're having some cognitive problems with. Are there any other sort of tips during your rehab that you found were really helpful? Little things like that.
Go at your own pace. Don't compare your recovery to anyone else. I guess one thing that I really recommend to survivors, take the time and be proud of yourself. Not everyone can walk down the road that you're on. And if you got say a journal or a scribbler, write down every single thing that you accomplished, say like this week or daily. And then when you go back and look at that scribbler, you're going to see how far. I mean, sometimes it might seem like things are going slow, but just have a look back at where you started. And I mean, there's going to be mountains of difference. And just, that's one of the biggest things I would say is be proud of yourself, and be proud of how hard you worked, and be proud of how much you've accomplished.
Fair enough. Now, you also mentioned that when you're on the bike, you'll close your eyes and take your hands off the handlebars to challenge your balance. You mentioned that riding the horses was also something that helped for your core stability, your balance, your leg strength, and what have you. What other aspects were you having to work on in the rehab clinic?
Well, signing my left hand, bar none, has been the most work. And I remember a couple of the first drills that I ever did, like that say that like they roll a soccer ball across the table to me, and I'd have to bring my arms together to stop the ball. And I remember, like, say there'd be 3 cones, and I'd have to stack one on top of the other, and that was a big deal. And then one of the first things, they're like, say there'd be a little table, and I'd have to throw a beanbag from the top of the table over to a garbage can. And that was one of the first things that I did to help with my left arm, but to help with my balance as well. And that's one thing about like Sonny this is kind of a little off course, but for the first 13 years, I kept the list of things I could do with my left arm or 2 arms. And it took 10 years to do half of that list. So it's just, well, to cut the fingernails on my right hand, like that probably took 12 years.
Jeez. It's amazing how the things that you take for granted, you never think twice about, will take so long to regain that level of function, that fine motor control for yourself in that instant, of course. Yeah. But wow. And were you doing anything specific following the discharge from rehabilitation for the left arm at all? Were you doing any specific exercises, or were you freewheeling it within your own limitations and then pushing through that barrier?
Yeah, like I can't remember the exact things I was doing, but I remember, signing, like after I was discharged, I took Botox for 4 years, I think 3 times a year in my left forearm. And like I had a splint, but at that time, I don't know, Sonny, if you guys, what your splints are like there, but at that time, it was like a hard plastic splint.
Yeah.
And your fingers would just curl in that splint. But I got a splint now. It's called Sabo. It's Saebo, and it flexes with your hand. That splint's, it's straightens everything out. I don't know. I guess just here. Sonny, I'll show you. Me touch my fingers now.
A little bit further in, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, did you see it?
Yeah. There you go. How about that? And that took you 10 years.
Yeah, and then, like I told you, it took 10 years to do change off the counter, but at the 16-year mark, I was able to pick change up off the ground.
There you go. It's amazing how your determination has kept you going through all of that. And you now do the motivational speaking. Would you have any sort of final words you'd like to impart to the listeners on that front at all, on being motivated through their own rehab and what we as practitioners could perhaps give to our patients as well?
For the survivors out there, take your recovery one day at a time. Make each day count. And the bottom line, never, ever give up. I've said it before, but be proud of yourself. And as for practitioners, never underestimate what a survivor can accomplish, and give them words of encouragement, I guess.
Were there any key qualities in any of your healthcare practitioners that for you stood out, for the ones that you resonated the best with, that you had the best therapeutic alliance with?
My first physio lady, she was a lady at the Glenrose, and she could see that I wanted to, I guess, push myself, and she kept working with me, and we'd go a little more, and she also, well, she seen that I was driven, so she went along for the ride with me and helped me, work a little harder. And then with the lady I had for speech at the beginning, well, I guess bottom line, she was just really nice. And she took the time and worked with me right from blowing bubbles to getting me talking again. And that's the biggest thing is, as a survivor working with a therapist, is just, to see a therapist in a good mood, or it makes you in a good mood. It makes you want to do your work harder in your therapies, because not just work harder, but you're having fun while you're putting in the work.
Yeah, I think that's a nice part to end it on. Be a mirror for your patient to see the positive in, I guess, would be one way to put it. Curtis, thank you very much for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your time.
And Sonny, probably the biggest compliment that I've ever had from speaking is some survivors told me that I was an inspiration for them to keep going in their recovery, and it don't get better when you hear a statement like that.
So Curtis, one last thing. Where is it that people can find you if they want to see your journey? As I've spent the last couple of days actually since we've been in touch, scrolling back through your Instagram. But yeah, where can people find you and see more of what's going on?
I'm Curtis Anderson 6 on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. And if anybody ever wants to, you can send me a message on Instagram. But if anybody ever wants to talk to me and ask questions about my journey or share their story with me, I'd like to hear your story. And thanks for listening.
Well, ladies and gents, thanks again for listening in, and we'll catch you next time. As always, wherever you're listening to this, we appreciate your time. And if you have any comments or suggestions, feel free to get in contact and let us know. Until next time, peace.